All right, you guys, so we are ready for part two. So far you should have your completed cylinder. So you have added your base on the bottom, and you've added the coil around the inside, and now it has turned to leather hard or cheese hard. So the walls are still flexible, okay? You can still carve into it easily, but you can kind of pick it up and hold it a little bit easier, and the walls aren't flopping around. Okay, so our next step is we are going to add a foot around the bottom of our base. So just like we did with our pinch pot, we want to add just a little ring that goes around the very exterior of the bottom, that will raise the base up away from the kiln shelf, so that when we glaze, we can glaze the base and it'll be nice and protected, so it'll be fully functional, easy to clean, wash, etc. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and set this aside for now. So I've already prepared to save some time. So all the clay scraps that you have in your bag, hopefully you've been keeping them really plastic. These were all the scraps we used when we cut our slab out of our original roll. So some scraps, make sure they're still really plastic. So one way you could just roll out a coil. So you need all of your clay. You roll out a nice big long coil just like we did before. But I want to show you another option. This might be a little bit easier to make sure that we get a very nice even foot, whereas in our last project, some of our foots were a little bit uneven. We had some thin areas, some thick areas, and it made your bowls maybe a little wobbly, and it took some extra time. So you would start off the same way by taking your clay and squeezing it into a long kind of rope shape, okay, just kind of like you would to roll out of a coil. But instead of rolling out a coil, we would lay it long ways, and I went ahead and I set up my fabric, my guide sticks, and then used my rolling pin to make a really nice long skinny strip. That will be our foot, okay? So we want to make sure that the foot, again, is going to be that same 1/4 of an inch thickness. So I used the same guide sticks I used when I rolled out my slab. So if you used your pencils, you can use your pencils as well. We want to make sure that it all matches. So I went ahead and I rolled it all out. I released it, I flipped it a couple times, roll it out so that my rolling pin just glides on top, and my slab is the thickness of those guide sticks. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to trim off a foot, and basically we want to have a very thin foot. We don't want to have, obviously this would be way too big. We want to just have that really small ring that goes around the outside. So the smaller, the thinner the foot is, the better, more functional your mug is going to be. So we really only need to have a skinny piece. So a couple options. You could just take your pencil, because the pencil is pretty much the thickness that we want, and lay your pencil down and cut alongside the pencil, slide it down, cut it, and have a really long skinny strip. If you have maybe a ruler or an old folder, any kind of straight edge would work, even probably the end of your hanger if you were using that. Okay, so I'm going to use the ruler just so it's clear and you can kind of see what I'm doing here. So you want to make sure that your foot is going to be long enough where it can wrap around the perimeter of the base. So probably before you start cutting it out, take your slab, kind of curl it around, and make sure that you'll have enough and maybe a little bit of extra. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to cut that out. Get my needle tool here and just follow along the seam of my ruler. Again, we want to make sure that we're going vertical. We're not cutting at an angle. So I'm going to remove that strip. This is still plastic, can go back in your scrap bag. And then I want to get that other side. So again, you want it to be at least probably about pencil thickness, because remember, we are going to blend a little bit on both sides. So be careful that your pencil doesn't roll and then you end up with this super skinny strip. You want it at least to be the thickness of the pencil so that when we blend a little bit from both sides, you're still going to have probably that little strip in the middle, that octagon little shape in the middle. Okay, so why don't I just do that just to show you? So make sure that you kind of support the pencil. And we'll go ahead and cut, again making sure that my needle tool is vertical. Slide my hand down, make sure the pencil isn't rolling. And I'll go ahead and slide the pencil down. Again, make sure it fits. And cut the rest of that out. Okay, then I can peel this scrap away. Go ahead, mist that down, put it back in your scrap bag. You can use it later. And now we have this little strip for our foot. Okay, so it's nice and flat on the top, and now we have the thickness that we want for our foot. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and attach this onto our base. So I usually again like to work on my bat or possibly a piece of fabric, plastic, or a paper towel, so that we don't do too much damage to our lip, right? We can always go back and smooth it out, but if you can avoid it, to not do too much damage to your lip. So I'm going to go ahead and move this stuff out of the way. And move my bat over. I like to use the bat just because then I can spin it, turn it. So if your bat maybe is dirty, you might want to lay down a piece of plastic or paper towel or something just to keep it protected. Okay. All right. So there we go. There's my foot. Impromptu kind of coil. And we're going to go ahead and attach it. So just the same process we always do whenever we attach one piece of clay to another. This time we want to make sure we score really well because the base of our cylinder has definitely turned more leather hard, and this clay is a little bit more plastic. So you don't want to just blend straight clay into another straight clay when they're different moisture levels. So we'll want to make sure we score really well. So we take our scoring tool, and this time we want to score right up against the edge. And you don't need to do too much extra scoring, just the thickness of your foot and then just a little bit extra. So if I were to lay this right here, you just see a little bit of extra coming out so that we can blend the clay in. Okay, so we'll go ahead and score all the way around the exterior of our foot. Placement. So either you could move your bat and spin it, or if it is leather hard and you're careful, you just want to be careful not to like drag it back and forth too much and change the form at all. Okay, so I've scored that. Then I'll go ahead and add my slip, score marks, add my slip. Again, if you don't have slip, water would be okay. It's better than nothing. But particularly now that we're joining leather hard pieces of clay, you'll definitely want to have slip if you can. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same scoring, just maybe at a different angle. I just want to make sure I'm going to get a really kind of nice Velcro attachment here. Okay. Alrighty. So then I have my foot. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and score the entire top. Let me move this so you can see it a little bit better. Score the entire top edge of that, or I guess bottom. We'll just flip it upside down. So I'm going to score that whole area. Again, you don't want to skip the scoring process. You want to make sure you've got a really nice, good attachment. So go in a couple different directions and get the whole thing scored up. Okay, so I've scored, I've slipped, I scored again just to make sure, and then now I'm going to go ahead and place my foot on. Okay, so again, I want to make sure that I'm going to line up the foot with the very exterior. So you don't really want it hanging out too much. You don't want it hanging inside. One big mistake a lot of people make is putting the foot towards the inside. And the problem with that is that then the weight of the wall isn't really resting on anything. And even if it dries okay, sometimes during the firing process, the clay will sink down and your base will kind of bubble in because there's so much pressure. So you want to make sure that your foot is sitting right underneath the weight of your cylinder wall. Okay, so we'll go ahead and line that up. Go all the way around, make sure that it is flush with the walls, and then any extra I have, I can just break it off, cut it off. Okay. There we go. Okay. So it's nice and flush. It kind of looks like when we added our base. And now we blend. Okay. So you're going to do the same thing as with our base, as you're just going to take your finger and blend the exterior seam, going around and blending the exterior seam, and then you'll go ahead and you'll blend the interior seam. So once you've arranged it and made sure that it's lined up, it's the right thickness, you just want to go ahead and give it a little squeeze. So I'm just taking my thumb, I'm not squishing it because I don't want to distort the thickness or the height. I'm just making sure that I don't have any air pockets inside. You guys can see a little bit of the slip that's squeezed out. So I'm just making sure that it's really secure. And then you go around and you blend the whole outside just to make it nice and smooth. And make sure you're supporting your walls. Don't press too hard. And then on the inside, we do want to do a little bit more blending. So I would recommend using one of your modeling tools to go in, and you do want to actually physically grab a little bit of that clay and push it down. So you're just grabbing a small chunk and pushing it down into the base. So this is going to make your foot just a little bit thinner. So that's why we wanted it to be at least the pencil thickness, so that when we grab a little chunk of this, we're still going to have enough thickness to keep our mugs nice and sturdy. Okay, so I just take a chunk and I push it straight down, pull out, and blend that clay into the center. Okay, so you just go ahead and do that around the entire piece. And make sure you are supporting your finger on the outside so that you're not pushing the wall out. Okay. Okay, so once you've got it all blended, then you can go ahead and take your finger. I just like to use the soft part of my finger, go in and smooth out any of those blending marks and go all the way around. Remove any little scrap pieces of clay that you have. Kind of clean your fingers every once in a while. even out your lip, or your foot, excuse me. Okay, you just do that to the whole thing and refine it. Again, make sure your hand is supported on the outside so your foot doesn't flare out or get distorted or released from your base, the connection. I'll smooth out that little seam. All right, and then it's just nitpicking, going in, smoothing things out, making sure you don't have any scratches. It's still going to be nice and even. And then we'll want to go ahead and leave our cylinders upside down like this for a little while so that we don't flip it over and then squish the base. So leave it upside down like this. I would recommend taking some plastic and wrapping plastic around the outside of your bowl and letting the top kind of air dry for a little while you're making your handles. And then once you make your handles, we can wrap everything up in the bag again and let those turn leather hard. And then we'll attach everything. Okay, so that is adding your foot.